I'd like to call to order the town council meeting for January 17th, 2023. It is 7 PM in the Harvey Hearing Room. Call to order, please.
Council Honan.
Here.
Council Fusillo.
Here.
Council Munson.
Here.
Council Belcher.
Here.
Council DeMarco.
Here.
Council Flockhart.
Here.
Council Aiello.
Here.
Vice President Ruggiero.
Here.
President Lettieri.
Here.
Thank you.
I'd like us to stand for the pledge, and after the pledge, please remain standing. Councilor DeMarco, please lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. I'd like to have a moment of silence for two people who have passed far too soon in life. First is Miriam Reagan Fiore. Miriam was a mother, an environmentalist, and a tempered professional, a compassionate person. On her hardest days, Miriam doubled down on her efforts to protect and promote trees in the town of Winthrop. Miriam asked the hard questions, launched grassroots initiatives, both by the book and with the heart. And throughout, Miriam was a great asset to our community with her dedication to her town and her trees. She took time to help review, study, and organize with our community representatives our current tree ordinance for the town of Winthrop. Miriam was also a past member of our Citizens Finance Committee. Our community will be missed. She'll be missed by our community and the force that surrounded her and her capabilities to get things done. And I would also like to take a moment of silence for Bobby Gillis. Today, the town lost a kind, gentle man who was loved by all. Bobby symbolized everything that is good about Winthrop. He was caring, kind, and compassionate. Bobby has been known as the mayor, our town historian to many, but a friend to all. Bobby has almost single-handedly kept much of the history of the town alive. If you needed a picture from the town, any part of the town, any period in time, you'd go to Bobby. Unlike others in this day and age, Bobby always used technology for good. He would post great pictures and rekindled many memories for lots of people. Bobby also did so much for his beloved Winthrop High School class of '82, as well as many other past classes. Bobby also worked many elections for our town clerk. To say he will be missed is a gross understatement. I'd like to ask everyone to bow their heads for both Miriam and Bobby for a moment of silence. Thank you. The minutes have been circulated for the January 3rd, 2023 meeting. Everyone has received them. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Councilor DeMarco, second by Councilor Belcher. Any discussions, additions, deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. So today, we're fortunate to have, we would like to honor our Abigail Adams recipients for the town. The Abigail Adams Scholarship, it's a merit-based scholarship. And it's based on 10th grade MCAS scores, where the individual has to score at least advanced in one category and proficient in the other, and the combined scores have to be in the top 25% of our district. And I apologize in advance because just through bad communication on my part and others, the invitations didn't go out in a timely manner, and we're unable to have a lot of the recipients here because of sports and work and such. But I do want to recognize all, and those who are here, please come up and receive your citation. And those who are not, we will absolutely make sure that you receive these citations. They're incredibly well-deserved, and academics is the foundation of the school system, and We like to look at all co-curricular activities, whether it be drama or sports, but it all starts with academics, and the ABCs are what gets you through life. So I'm very proud to be able to announce these people. And if you're not here, obviously, don't come up. And if you are here, please do. First one is Kaylin Barry, Christian Bonapane, Michael Callahan, Elizabeth Carney,
Congrats, thank you so much.
Jennifer Delahanty, Julian Demers, Hannah Esuabi. Congratulations. Nathan Evangelista. This is Hannah's. Gabriella Golden. Daniel Nieves. Samantha Harrison. Anika Holgerson. Nathaniel Holmes. Mohammed Huari. Elio Haisa. Gabrielle Leske. Daniel Liberti. Zoe Long. Natalia Melnick. Nino Maliavi. Robert Noonan. Delia Panko.
Yay.
Haven Pereira. Tom Petty. Mila Pimenta. Matthew Polino. Corinne Powell. And Corinne is unable to attend, but Jen Powell, her mom, is here, who's the chairperson of the school committee.
Just as deserving.
Benjamin Prue. Christopher Rainey. Joseph Romano. Madison Stiglitz. And Lily Talent. Thank you to all. I mean, congratulations to all on a extremely well-deserved honor. It's a very difficult thing, especially as a 10th grader, getting ready to graduate and having to take MCAS once again. But I congratulate you all on your efforts. And Hannah, I think you might have the wrong. Come on up and. I appreciate you guys coming, and you have no obligation to stay any further.
Oh, come on.
Even though we have another great presentation.
Yeah.
We are also extremely fortunate to have Michael Trepanier from Mass DOT, who has graciously accepted my invitation to come before the council and to give us a few updates on what Mass DOT is doing, especially as it goes to a small section of Bennington Street, kind of near Suffolk Downs Station, going down towards the Beachmont School, I believe.
That's correct.
So Michael can give us a brief overview on that, and if we have some questions for Mass DOT, I'm sure we have the ability to keep Michael here for hours and hours, but we will not do that.
Oh, and I can talk
I-
all night.
But welcome, Michael, and again, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, councilors, for having us here tonight. I'm joined with Taylor Dennerline, our consulting project manager from Tool Design Group. As the president said, my name is Michael Trepanier. I wear a number of hats at Mass DOT, and tonight I'm actually wearing two of my favorite, as both our Trails and Bike Ped program manager and our safety program manager. So my role at MassDOT is pretty focused on projects. We're all about developing projects that, well, I'm not sure what's happening here, but we'll get there in a second. I'll just give my introduction and get there in a sec. My role is to take ideas and turn them into realities, and that happens in the sort of larger scale tip style projects that towns like Winthrop can take advantage of. I know we have like a pretty significant project on 145. The project I'm here to discuss is a much smaller scale, what we just kind of refer to as more tactical or quick build type approach for a stretch of Bennington Street, which is nowhere near Orient Heights. So
Recording in progress.
nowhere near Orient Heights, but up quite a bit further down. But kind of a pilot of the condition that has been sort of workshopped through other planning efforts with the city of Boston and the community outside of Winthrop, and also of course the city of Revere. So, and is this on, by the way, Denise? Mm-hmm. Okay, just make sure. So again, this is something that we're sort of workshopping in an effort to try and drive speeds down on Bennington Street in that long stretch of Bennington Street in front of the marsh, where we are experiencing a great deal of speeding and unsafe conditions for people trying to make connections between either Suffolk Downs or Beachmont on foot or cycling. That's funny. I hope for folks at home that that's not the way it looks. But I'm here to talk about the so-called Bennington Street redesign. And I'm going to talk through some of the goals that we have for our project. Does that make sense? No? Okay. Oh, there we go. All right. All right. Thank you, Council. I guess it made sense if there was a mirror, but we're going to talk through some of the existing conditions, which I think for folks who have driven up towards Revere from Winthrop are probably pretty familiar with. Kind of give you a glimpse of the draft plans we have on the table and under review at MassDOT, and then have an opportunity to kind of talk through some questions or feedback from the council. So this isn't something MassDOT is doing in a box or in a vacuum. We've been partnered with staff from the city of Revere, staff from the city of Boston, planners from the DCR, and of course with support from our consultant at Tool Design. Suffolk Downs has also had a seat at the table, mostly because we're making connections to other offsite mitigation plans that they have for what we refer to as Donnelly Square, but the intersection of Bennington State Road and Winthrop Ave. So our goals overall for this stretch of road are to reduce vehicle speeds, improve those multimodal connections, which in my next map you'll see how those pieces tie together with other ongoing initiatives here in the town of Winthrop, and take a very small first step towards implementing those local and regional plans that we have in terms of speed management at the state level, regional plans for a connected, safe, comfortable bicycle and walking network that connects open space, and local plans, at least at the city of Boston and to a lesser extent the city of Revere, for improving Bennington Street and the connections between the MBTA's Blue Line and open space at the Belle Isle and Revere Beach. So this map shows some of those pieces of the puzzle coming together, and on the top left of the screen you see Constitution Beach and the terminus of the existing East Boston Greenway, and some different colored lines. That blue line shows our bike inventory at MassDOT.
essentially denoting the bike lane, at least on one side of Saratoga Street, and some of those dash green lines showing other pieces of the bicycle network, multimodal network that are envisioned. I think that this map our inventory is a little out of date because there are definitely additional connections between where we're sitting here in Winthrop, or at least out to the Belle Isle and Morton Street, crossing the Belle Isle Inlet and getting back to Orient Heights and connecting back to East Boston Greenway, and then also making those connections up to the Suffolk Downs redevelopment site, their proposed connection up Wally Street, and then inclusive of our study area, that purple line going down towards Bennington and ultimately making the connection to the Revere Beach Boardwalk at Elliott Circle. So again, no surprise here for anyone who's driven or walked along Bennington, but it's a 4-lane undivided road and it's just a sea of pavement. There are substandard but present sidewalks on both sides, parking in sections along the corridor that we think has some various uses, and a speed limit that is probably 20 miles an hour down on the Beachmont School end, and up to 30 miles an hour on the East Boston side. So before we do anything at MassDOT, we have to go and collect data and better understand if we're going to make a change to a road, how are we going to impact operations or speed or any of those things. So we put out early on a pretty robust traffic collection program, and we did this in 2 stages. We did it first during our early planning for the project, during sort of not quite shut down, but still inter-COVID in 2021, and then recollected counts. I don't know, when was that exactly? Last fall, right? May 22, thank you. In an attempt to try and capture the post-COVID return of traffic volumes. So what we found was that while speed limits in the corridor were 20 or 30, that the average speed of folks traveling in their vehicles are going upwards of 34, 39, with 77% or 76% going well over that 30 miles per hour, and that 85th percentile, or the majority of folks traveling upwards of 40 to 45. And while this may not be the stretch of Bennington that has made major news articles in our communities, this is sort of that stretch that has the most simplicity in trying to scale Bennington down and kind of limit the scale of it, of that comfort of speeding on it like it's a highway segment, and kind of shrinking things through the use of tactical intervention like paint and flex posts. We also took a look at sort of the total daily volume of cars moving down the corridor, and it's actually quite a bit lower than we expected at about 10,690. In terms of major arterial roads like this in an urban setting, this is pretty low, and kind of is, according to guidance we have both at the state and the federal level, ripe for what we refer to as a road diet, where we convert from this sort of large open 4-lane cross section to something that's a little more manageable and can reallocate some of that space to other uses. So we model and did some field observations to understand what's happening at the 2 signals, one at Leverett Ave or at Suffolk Downs Station, and then the other over at Everard Street, just about a block away from the Beachmont Blue Line Station and Winthrop Square. Donnelly Square. And what we're finding is most of the traffic is just kind of flying through these intersections because these signals are on a pedestrian call button, and the only time that the signal ever goes from green to red is when someone is trying to cross the road, or a vehicle is maybe sitting at Leverett Ave and trips the light. So really minimal A+ operations here. But as many of you know, as residents here in Winthrop, that is not the case further up the corridor at Orient Heights Square. And these 2 intersections we believe operate completely independently, given their far geography. So again, this is just sort of cartoonifying that cross section and looking at how much space we actually have out there. And on both sides of the road, we have a large grass buffer and variable width 6-foot sidewalk, 9-foot parking lanes, and 10.5-foot travel lanes where they're actually striped. I think this cartoon kind of idealizes that parking lane with, it makes it look like there's actually a white stripe out there, but it's just a big wide sea of pavement in most cases, especially on the Boston side. So our plan for Bennington is to reallocate a lot of that space and repurpose those one travel lane in each direction and provide offset travel lanes that are separated by a painted gored median. That's that yellow paint you're seeing depicted in the center. Preserving parking on both sides in various locations. I got another slide that'll show you that. And then reallocating some of that space as well for a two-way separated bike lane. So this is going to be at roadway level, not sort of separated, but painted, buffered, and separated with, well, our hope is, we're still sort of in negotiation amongst ourselves at MassDOT, but our hope is with sort of the flex post quick curb that you see us introducing downtown Boston, all across the country, I don't know, all across the Commonwealth, but all across the country too. These are sort of modular things that you can help create, really sort of define the buffer and create some vertical element, but it still relies on drivers sort of behaving. This ties into the plans that HYM has for Donnelly Square, where they have two-way separated facilities that go past the Beachmont School and then cross Donnelly Square and kind of start marching towards Revere Beach. Yeah. So this is a look at the plan, and this is down on the Boston side. So on the top of the screen would be right about where the Suffolk Downs station is. And you see we've highlighted this, the sort of green paint. We wouldn't paint this much green in real life. We'd probably paint the dash boxes. That's what we use in civil engineering to denote, like, this is a conflict area. If you're on a bike, be careful here. But we're showing you here to just better depict where that space is for cyclists. And this is at the area where we're transitioning to that two-way bike facility and trying to get folks safely where they need to be and reposition them. So if someone's coming from Revere going towards Boston, this is where they would have to cross back and then essentially get back into general purpose traffic as indicated by that shared lane marking in the top left corner, coming up and over the bridge past the old casket site. In the other direction, we introduce that two-way facility for bikes, and we've got traffic, some additional space for potential queuing of traffic at the signal leverage. So you see that gored median just starting to get introduced right off at the edge of the page. As you get down closer to the Belle Isle Marsh Reservation driveway, you know, there's some pretty substantial improvement if you're taking that left into the driveway from the Revere end, and you've ever tried to make that left and feel the drivers behind you speeding up at you and you're waiting for the gap to get across two lanes. This will give you that space to sort of find a gap in oncoming traffic that's Revere bound, and you can more safely get into the Belle Isle driveway. And you're doing that in that gored area, in that new dedicated left turn pocket, so that, you know, hopefully no one's supposed to be traveling there. But one of the big things we've heard a lot about, at least from councilors in the city of Revere and some others, is, you know, what about evacuation? This is one of the only ways in or out of East Boston, and indirectly so in and out of Winthrop. And this intervention kind of gives us the opportunity to test how this is going to work without actually closing the roadway in on itself, changing curb line and all that, but start to reduce that comfort of a big wide open road and help drive speeds down in a way that, you know, we typically refer to as traffic calming, but, you know, sort of understanding that it's just paint. If you're on one side of that debate, that, oh, well, we're concerned about how this road still functions on the long term, or it's just paint. Doesn't do quite that much for those that are biking the corridor, but it gets a heck of a lot more protection over what's there today, which is just kind of take your life in your hands. And this is the transition on the eastern end, over on the Revere side. The Beachmont School is just in the bottom right side of this screen, off screen. And we transition into, this is an area where we really wanted to make sure we were managing queues coming out of Donnelly Square, and that congestion that's kind of happening there and is proposed to continue to happen ultimately during, especially the morning peak hour. And so we maintain that 2 travel lanes as you're heading eastbound, and then they merge together. That separated, or buffered bike lane is still kind of carrying down, and we'll meet up with the improvements that you're seeing sort of grayed out on this screen that are proposed as part of the Donnelly Square offsite improvements by HYM. So they are doing something that's a little more permanent and like sidewalk grade behind the curb line. You can see that just down there in the bottoms of the screen. Might not be that obvious to folks, but for those of us who have looked at these plans 100 times. So that's really where our work ends, and we're just gonna tie into their project. They don't necessarily need each other. One could go without the other and both still work, and they're essentially interoperable and separable. And we've been hearing uncertainty about exactly when when that comes online at Suffolk Downs, that would prompt their mitigation requirement to actually construct this from their MIPA commitments and likely City of Revere commitments. This is a shot showing in those big long red lines where right now pretty much parking is allowed end to end on this stretch of Bennington. But what we found with observation and just literally walking out there many times is that parking is very, very underutilized. There's some high turnover over down at Suffolk Downs, and then we see a bit more out in front of the apartment buildings and those areas that are a little more residential on the Revere side. But for the most part, that big, long, open stretch of Bennington is just unused parking. We did meet with the Friends of the Belle Isle Marsh back last summer, and we were a bit surprised. They were quite frustrated with us not knowing that during special events, especially when there's marsh swallow tagging and things like that, that actually the parking lot's full and people are lined up down Bennington Street. So one of the things we did was change that design closer to the Belle Isle driveway so folks could park in these sort of protected bays on Bennington and be able to get down to the driveway. One of the questions we heard a lot, I'm just going to say it because this is my 3rd or 4th road show on this. I told you guys I'd talk a lot. Is why can't you create a crossing? We really want a crossing here, and we really do too. We think that's a really great idea. The scope of this work really didn't give us that opportunity, and this is City of Boston's road. MassDOT has jurisdiction from the Revere line east, and it's something that we're definitely recommending and would be willing to support implementation for. We just didn't want to get into all the survey requirements and ADA connections and that sort of compliance stuff that would can of worms that would open up to make the improvements on the sidewalks on both sides. So we sort of said, let's just see how this goes. In the meantime, we'll put the parking on this side so that folks who are trying to get to, especially slightly, less able-bodied people and, who aren't going to dodge across the street like I do, won't have to make that crossing. They're just kind of walking in more casually from these parking areas when that overflow is necessary. And then the bottom line here is, what happens to the traffic? And what we found is that we go from about 5 seconds delay to about 15 over at Leverett Ave. We think that that's pretty unsubstantial, and without exaggerating a ton, could actually maybe under the worst case scenario when traffic's really bad coming from Revere out to Orient Heights, could start to meter some of that a little bit and hold that big slug of traffic that's just slipping and sliding all the way from Revere right to Orient Heights. And I don't want to overstate that, but these are the kinds of things that we look at from a larger network perspective and say, all right, maybe this could be a good thing and have an unintended positive consequence. But all in all, queuing is really minimal. You're going to get there, you might hit a red light, and you're going to get through in the next cycle. On the Revere side, that delay is even less at Everard Street, and most of the delay that's being introduced is changes at Donnelly Square from the project that's being proposed by HYM, and just trying to balance all the various movements that are happening at that intersection coming out of Beachmont, coming out of Revere, and coming from Route 1A. We were also challenged quite a bit by your elected officials. Representative Turco was really concerned when we met with him, and rightfully so. And we didn't have this available, so this was a really nice addition. The sort of bigger concerns around what happens when Suffolk Downs comes online, and we scoured through Taylor. I shouldn't take the credit. Taylor scoured through their traffic impact assessment. Very large report, and I'll stop you, Taylor. Why don't you walk us through the details? No, go ahead. I don't want to drag you out here for nothing.
No, sorry. Yeah, questions? For their traffic impact assessment, they had volumes predicted out to the year 2040, so that's when they expect all of Suffolk Downs to be up, operating, and ready. So even though our proposed improvements are, like Michael just said, paint, flex post, generally things that, if after a year we find that, things went crazy, something went wrong, we can very easily just take it out. We use those 2040 volumes just to make sure that this design would be fine, 2 decades from now. So we found that yes, they would still be fine in general. So at Everard Street, you'll see the delay does grow a little bit. The average queue does back up a little bit more. Still, not backing up to Donnelly Square, so plenty of room for that. And then at Leverett Avenue, so you do see we actually have better vehicle operations with more traffic. That's because to get people biking across Bennington Street, right now we have to do some kind of funky things with the signals to get them across safely. Whereas in 2040, we could upgrade the signals, put in detection, kind of make it run a little bit better. Things that we aren't able to do, in the next few months to a year. Whenever the city of Boston wants to upgrade their signal, it's a pretty easy, kind of fix for them. So with that fix, the delay goes back to pretty much existing conditions.
Pretty much no delay. And that's really that's our story. We have been doing community engagement sort of informally and sort of more formally over the last month or two. We published this, what we refer to as a story map. That's really just as a repackage, a branded name for a website. But we can share that link and share the presentation if you'd like.
Please.
So that, it's a little more social media friendly. You can get the message out a little more rapidly to community members. We're happy to do additional direct outreach, including moments like this at Winthrop Town Council, or if there's other neighborhood groups that are interested. And we're absolutely interested in, once we go out and restripe the roadway and make these changes, assessing how it's working and making sure that the assumptions, modeling outcomes that we made in this pre-construction analysis are bearing true. And that, if at any point, we got a lot of concern from others about, what if it doesn't work? Well, that's the beauty of doing things with paint and plastic, is if we were wrong, we can undo it. But, we've got a lot of experience working on stuff like this at MassDOT. We've done some much higher profile, at least as far as I thought, roadways that had much higher volumes, and they've been successful, and those safety benefits have really reaped true. And the larger benefits that, frankly, a couple thousand, 1,000 feet, half a mile stretch of new bike lane, doesn't really add significantly to the network, or get more folks, out there recreating and, taking advantage of our world-class open space at Belle Isle and at Revere Beach. But it's a step in the direction of ultimately what is envisioned by my partners at DCR and EEA and others in state government, our so-called Trails team that I participate in. Our goal is to connect Winthrop, East Boston, to Revere, to Lynn, and ultimately back to the border of New Hampshire and back to Assembly Square in Somerville. And this small stretch is part of that much larger vision of a interstate level of off-road, high comfort bicycling and walking facilities that Winthrop, I think, would be a big part of taking advantage of. And one of the things that prompted this, which isn't really captured in our slide deck, is the work that I've done with the town from early feasibility on the Winthrop extension of the Mary Ellen Welch Greenway, and looking at how that connects to the Belle Isle Ecology Park and making those connections to Winthrop Beach. This is sort of that other leg of the stool that the extension of the Greenway could provide a lot more community benefit for folks who maybe don't live within the confines of East Boston or Revere, but are our neighbors here to the east.
Well, again, I can't thank you enough. I'm going to ask a few questions and open it up. I also want to thank Representative Turco for attending your first meeting and then bringing it to my attention. We like to be involved in anything, we have one way in, one way out, right? And that stretch of Bennington Street is really the conduit between the 2 points. So I thank Representative Turco again for bringing it to my attention, and I can't thank you guys enough. What's the timeline on this potential project?
I'd be lying to you if I knew, because we've got a lot of process to work through at MassDOT first. So we're at, I guess I apologize, I didn't even ever say these words. We're at 25% design, which is, or really our draft design. This is not the full federal style project that would require 10 submissions. But we've got through our first formal submission, and we're concluding review of that internally. We would then, Taylor's team is going to work on the 75% or 100% submission. That'll get reviewed by MassDOT, City of Revere, City of Boston, and all the various departments at City of Boston. And then we do have to go through some very formal permitting with the City of Boston through their Public Works. Probably some additional formalities with the City of Revere as well. In an ideal world, we would have consensus and full sort of comfort and buy-in with the project. We've got some more homework to do with the Revere City Council too, candidly. In a perfect world, from our perspective at MassDOT, we'd be restriping, putting this in the ground late spring, early summer. We have funding set aside for the construction. It's not a major capital investment, but we've sort of got the funding set aside and know our contract mechanism and all that. But permitting in the City of Boston is a little more complicated, and going through their various boards and commissions requires some more formalities. So I think we've probably got a schedule that says June 2023, but if things get kind of tied up in process, they get tied up in process.
And, you mentioned the vehicle counts and how you were a little surprised, and I'm not sure when those counts were taken, if it was summer or winter. I mean, obviously summer, people going to the beach, you would think more. My one concern with this, or one of my concerns, but my main concern with this is the timing in terms of, the Sumner Tunnel is going to be closed 24/7, right, for 6 months, I believe, basically spring to fall. So people leaving Winthrop, a lot of people, even now, and I'd love to see if you guys can think about maybe taking counts on weekends when the tunnel's closed now, because that Bennington Street stretch and then taking a left on Winthrop Street by the Suffolk Downs project and getting onto the Revere Beach Parkway, people are trying to get in town by taking the loop and then going on the highway over the bridge, and the traffic patterns on the weekends are incredibly high in that stretch. So, again, timing doing this when that tunnel's closed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, might be a little bit of a struggle for Winthrop, and, you know, we'd like to have some input on that. You know, because that's real. The effects from that tunnel closure
I see it. I see it over on the
incredibly
McCardle
real.
Bridge, trying to get out of Bennington Street. I'm getting out of Meridian, going that direction towards Chelsea. It's
And even with the
feels
work
it.
they're doing at Suffolk, you know, in that stretch where the new apartments and the hotel are, where the old Saratanis, I guess, used to be, coming into Winthrop, getting towards Donnelly Square or Toretta's or whatever people would recognize it as, is extremely difficult, because a lot of I mean, they're doing a lot of infrastructure work, I guess, bringing it over to Suffolk Down, so that's been a struggle for people in Winthrop too, and they're going back and forth or whatever, not knowing which way to go. And then when we ever have, like we had a couple of weeks ago, when the gate closes in Revere, and now you have people trying to get through Bennington Street because they can't get back into Winthrop, they have to come that route to get up to the Heights and come back.
Short
Right.
drive, yeah.
So, but it's incredibly thankful, and we're very appreciative that you take the time to come and talk to us. And I'll start with the Vice President and see if there's any questions from the council.
No, just, what was the logic, well, first of all, thank you for coming, we really appreciate it. What was the logic of the 2 lanes coming out of Revere and 1 going back into Revere the other direction? How was that decision made and what was it based off?
Yeah.
I have another question,
Oh.
well, I'll ask them both and then you can
Okay.
respond, but, you showed that parking was underutilized there, and just as someone who drives that, not as regularly as I used to, but somewhat regularly, you know, you don't even know that you can park there, because I think people just use it to kind of go around, people that are maybe stopped in the street, or, so, I don't know, could a line be painted there, just so people know that there is parking? Could that happen a little bit sooner rather than later? Because I think that would, maybe help some of like the speeding issues on the street too, just the fact that people, if they were parked on the street, you wouldn't be as tempted to just floor it and get out of Revere as fast as possible.
Yeah.
So, those are my 2 questions.
Okay.
Again, thank you, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, this is why I wanted to respond. I don't have my little notepad to. Okay, right. So the 2 lanes out of Revere, that came out of initial review by DOT and the traffic analysis. That the concern was. Let's see if I have a slide that captures this. Well, I don't, because it's right on both. It's right over the sort of the crop here. One of the biggest concerns that our traffic engineers, and a lot of traffic engineers have, is queue management. And so Taylor kind of talked about this for a moment in, I guess I'm getting the slides backwards, but one of the bigger concerns we had was if we made those changes at Everard, and that those queues would back up past Crescent on the screen and start to extend past Winthrop Ave. So one of the tricks that we can use is to help process those queues more efficiently, is to allow 2 receiving lanes on the far side of this signal. So that was the logic there, and it gives us a pretty significant discount, if you will, with the traffic analysis tools that we use, and shows that those queues are a lot more manageable. And we talk about 50th percentile, or as Taylor referred to it as the average queue, and then there's this 95th percentile, which is like the worst queue that happens during the worst part of the worst rush hour of the day. We don't believe that's going to happen, but that's part of the thinking there. In terms of trying to get some paint on the ground today, you'd be more likely to have more success with a spray can from Ace Hardware. We can't really mobilize something at that scale, but I could see the benefit. In that, you know, so for MassDOT to take on an action, we kind of have to have that larger scale. This project, even of itself, is, you know, we're proposing some resurfacing down on the Revere end. MassDOT has neglected that roadway surface for some time. It's a bit of a strange little orphan segment of state highway that I think our district maintenance folks sort of just haven't been prompted to get around to. So there's a lot of benefit there in terms of trying to manage the road, but also get some of these larger safety benefits. And then, just to respond to the Sumner closure, this was a concern that I had, and we did run our sort of larger, we have all kinds of different modeling tools at MassDOT. One of the ones we use to help understand what happens when we make large scale changes to roadways, where traffic goes. So we used the same model that we used to understand where does traffic go when we close the Sumner. We also modeled what happens when this, we call it a link in the network, was constructed from 2 to 1 lane in each direction. And we saw really, really minimal impacts. Now that's a model, and I think, you know, we can certainly do some spot counts on a weekend and better understand how that's impacting the travel patterns that we didn't capture during our last count. So definitely a great opportunity for us to kind of sharpen our pencils and take a closer look at that. Because I think even me, as I managed to mention this to Denise earlier, but I live down the point in East Boston, and you know, there's been those impacts that we felt quite a bit on the first weekend of the closure, and they're still reverberating quite a bit as folks have kind of settled into that more routine closure weekend by weekend.
And the weekends are more leisure traffic. When this starts in the spring, it's gonna be workday traffic too, so. It's a
Essential
different-
traffic, yeah.
It's a different
Yeah.
segment. Councilor Flockhart?
Thank you, Council President. My questions relate to the bike lanes. As you know, we're putting through a TIPS project here, and we've been doing designs, and we're getting a lot of pushback on the bike lanes. Why did you choose to put the 2 bike lanes on the same side of the road?
Great question. I didn't talk through those details. One of our older slide decks did, but early on when we were sort of envisioning what's the right intervention here, we did develop an alternative that had one direction in one way, another direction in the other. And with feedback from our partners at the city, DCR, the cities and DCR, and then really kind of looking at what's going to make this feel safer, what's going to make this operate less as just sort of a painted area and really kind of give folks space. That bi-direction on one side kind of grows up. It also tied in better with the work that HYM was planning down on this end of the corridor in Revere.
It would seem like at some point, they have to cross back over,
That's true.
twice.
That's true. So if you're coming from Revere, you will come across Donnelly Square, and there will be, in the full build, there will be, make sure I'm getting that going. In the full build, there will be signal equipment and paint and sort of all the accommodations that will make that more comfortable than trying to operate against a parking lane with painted buffer. And I'll just acknowledge it. I ride this corridor on, I call it my local loop. I come out from the point and I go out Bayswater, come down through the marsh, and then usually make my connection back from Elliott Circle, out Bennington and through the Heights and back down the Greenway. And one of the things I've learned to do, because I've had some very uncomfortable encounters with vehicles taking the lane on the outbound side, or the Boston bound side, is that cars are just kind of going so very, very fast. And then especially you get on a blind corner as you're coming up and over the Blue Line Bridge near the casket site, that I just usually ride opposite. And I see other cyclists do that from time to time as well. You're a lot more visible, and it just feels a little more comfortable on that side. I think that the roadway quality, there are a couple of different really minor factors, but this was sort of the settled upon alternative. But we looked at the other. For the sake of making that connection, having that larger swath of safety, I think as a cyclist, you'd rather have that room than worry about making the cross.
And is the Suffolk Downs group, are they making bicycle things part of their plan as well?
Yeah.
I did see their plan, but that was some time ago.
So
and I don't
you can
remember
see,
the
it's
bicycle.
really hard to see in this figure, but this line right here is showing that separated bike lane facility that's sort of at sidewalk level. I don't want to talk too long if there's others online listening. It's more at like sidewalk level, whereas ours is going to be more at roadway level and kind of just separated by paint.
Okay.
But you know, this is kind of in a facility like this that helps us maximize areas that we can still reserve for parking on that northern edge, and not have to introduce the occasional, probably minor conflict with vehicles coming out of parking, opening their doors and whatnot with others that would be traveling outbound.
Plowing as well. So if it's
Oh, right,
too
great
early,
point, great point.
plowing, snow plowing. So with the facility this wide, just a regular snow plow can go down it. Whereas if you do kind of one on each side, you need special equipment, and then with the different jurisdictions, it gets a little bit trickier. But here, it's just easier to send a regular plow.
Yeah, it's more likely. Great point. Thank you, Taylor. I get carried away. It's a lot easier for us to those side edge bike lanes when they're one direction. They tend to just be the place where snowbanks end up.
Councilor Aiello?
Yeah, hi, thanks for coming. Couple of questions and comments. First of all, thanks for describing the bikeway network that's under development, because I think there has been some pushback, but personally I've heard from more people who like the bike lanes on Revere Street than don't. Those who don't, I think it's illogical to have a piece of bike lane just like you're doing on Bennington Street. It's really part of building a network, so I think the more Mass Highway can be consistent about getting out the ultimate network and what people are building towards would be helpful to get them to understand that there is a logic for these investments that you all are trying to make in cooperation with the municipalities. So I think that's very, very helpful. I also just heard recently that the T seems to be loosening its approach to accommodating that bridge structure coming from Winthrop over to the Orient Heights side, the proposed new bridge for the Greenway, and allowing the bike lane to travel through the what is now the surface parking deck. So
Yes, yeah.
that's a piece of news. Small scale and large scale. Small scale is coming out of, I'm a frequent user of the Belle Isle Marsh Reservation. And you're absolutely right, people bomb down that street. And when you're coming out, especially you got your grandchildren in the car and all that stuff, to take a left is death-defying, right? People are 200 yards away and then they're on you by the time you stop peeking out, and God forbid someone's bombing coming from the Beachmont side, you're stuck. And I've had a couple of close calls. I know a lot of other people have had close calls there.
Recording in progress.
Is it possible to think about a triggered red light there, that if you're coming out of that parking lot, it could trigger a red light to stop everybody so people could take a left-hand turn without having to dodge people going whatever they're traveling at? I think that's a big safety issue. You have a lot of big festivals around the course of the year that's happening, a lot of bird watching elements, et cetera. So I strongly encourage you to sort of help facilitate that move out of the Belle Isle Reservation. It's a frequently used, it's a gem of a place, but it's death-defying to get out of there. Larger scale, I think it's important to sort of get this testing done well. One of the things that I worry about is what's happening with the McClellan Highway and the levels of congestion that have been growing astronomically. So if you go back pre-COVID and you go to today, it's all day backed up all the time. What you're getting is more and more diversions that are coming down this stretch of Bennington Street. They come bombing through. They get up to Orient Heights and they bomb through down Bennington Street. It has a secondary problem for us, which is it makes the intersection we're trying to get out of, our lifeline, more congested, right, as we come up Saratoga Street and all that. So anything you can do to dissuade people from thinking that's a bypass in McClellan Highway, it's not. It's coming through a residential neighborhood, and it's our lifeline to get out of this town into downtown Boston and beyond. So I think the quicker the implementation, the better, albeit I think the President's comments about making sure we don't exacerbate what's about to happen with the closing of the Sumner Tunnel is important. Two other things in this local network that sort of bug me. I've just put on your list, I don't know what it's worth.
Yeah, bring it on.
We talked about the area of Short Beach. That's designed for 50-mile-an-hour speeds, and people coming from, was it Elliott Circle over in Revere? Coming into Winthrop, they're supposed to be traveling at 25, 30 miles an hour. They're entering Winthrop down at that end at 50 miles an hour, and it takes an awful lot to sort of get them to sort of slow down in a densely developed neighborhood. So I think that roadway needs a lot of attention with respect to traffic calming, et cetera. You don't have a lot of right-of-way to play with, but it's just a hazardous area. The other place that's getting increasingly worse, and it's in part, I think, gotten worse since the city of Revere rejiggered the roadways all around Elliott Circle area, and I think you guys in DCI were involved, is you're coming down Ocean Avenue, and you want to take a left at that light to come back towards Winthrop. People coming from Serratani's, we're old enough to know what that is, you're too young.
I don't know.
From the Suffolk Downs area. I'm always reminded, never mind.
It was a Shaw's for a while.
It was a Shaw's for a
It was a
while.
Shaw's for a while.
But they're coming over that bridge structure at 60, 70 miles an hour. I mean, it is a race of 2 lanes to 3 lanes to get down there and all that. And you don't have a chance in anything to get across that flow of traffic. There needs to be a red light down at the bottom of that bridge. When you got a left-hand turn happening, that traffic ought to stop. It's a horrible
Oh, it's
situation.
at Revere Beach.
Yeah,
Was
we're
Revere,
heading towards
16?
Elliott Circle from the
Right.
top,
Right,
from
yeah,
Suffolk
yeah.
Downs down.
Oh, yeah.
I've just stopped using that intersection
awful.
because it's so dangerous. Instead, I go around to Donley Square.
A red light signal that gets triggered when we're trying to take a left is gonna save lives. I'm not kidding, it's just awful. So, I'll stop there. Pass the mic.
So, I think those are really great comments. I just want to address this one in particular. A signal at this location would never pass muster with our traffic engineers. It wouldn't meet our warrants that are required to install equipment like that. I will say, I am very firmly believe that making this left coming out of the driveway, trying to go towards, I'm really hoping my computer doesn't die in the meantime, trying to go left towards Orion Heights is going to be significantly more comfortable. You'll be able to kind of look both ways, make sure there's no cyclists coming, which under most conditions there won't be. You'll be in that area, you'll be queued up in that area, it's not on the screen anymore, but in that buffered area where the parking bay is. Only have to look across one lane of traffic, make sure no one's taking the left in, and see a little bit further. But the whole goal here is to simplify those kinds of moves. So you're calming the traffic that are in the lanes that we've left, and makes movements like that a lot simpler. So rather than having 4 or 5 conflict points, you've got 2 or 3.
I bet if you looked around, you'd find some places similar traffic volumes and moves that have red lights. I bet you. I could probably name 4 for you. You won't get
There's
to go
this
there.
very notorious location in Newton that we've discussed a lot over the last couple of years. But that's for another council.
Well, you have a triggered red light at Leverett Ave, right, at Leverett and Bennington there. Different
Yeah,
situation.
and frankly, that was one that I thought we were going to have the same kind of internal conversation about, that signal's not warranted.
It is because of the school. There's a lot of kids that cross there, so they meet the certain warrant.
But at Leverett?
At Leverett, which is the
Everett,
Boston.
excuse
side.
me. Everett,
Yeah, Everett
yeah.
is different, right. But Leverett, which is kind of near Suffolk Downs
So
train station.
technically, if it was our signal, and we were doing a larger scale capital project where we were making physical changes to that signal equipment, my people at MassDOT would say you gotta remove that. It's not warranted. So,
Councilor DeMarco?
It's known as Gloria Baptista's traffic signal, by the way. Check City Hall.
I'm gonna check City Hall.
Councilor DeMarco?
Am I good?
You're good.
All right. Taylor, Michael, thank you for being here.
Really appreciate it. I'll be pretty brief. First off, one thing that, you know, it's funny, it came up 2 weeks ago. You were mentioning about when the sea gates are closed because of a storm, that street becomes an absolute disaster. So this isn't even a question. This is just a concern. You know, I would look into ways to alleviate that, whether it's more, you know, police involvement during storms or whatnot, whatever we can do to keep that traffic flowing, because it does bottleneck. Overall, I think most people who go out of town through Revere either go up Route 1 or go to the Beachmont train station. I think most people who go out of town through East Boston usually take the left on Bennington Street or go over and take the tunnel. There's not many that go out and take a right or vice versa. The one thing, though, that is like one of the best kept secrets for Winthrop residents like myself is
Not anymore.
about to let the cat out of the bag is
Build the recording.
cut the mic. The Suffolk Downs train station. It seems like that is going to be right in the middle of all the action. What are the effects going to be on access to the parking lot at the Suffolk Downs train station?
I think very minimal, if none at all. You know, again, the only potential there would be if we were seeing those larger queues and you're waiting to make that turn into the parking lot, but I don't think there's any real impact there.
Okay.
I think the bigger impact is coming down the road when the T addresses Suffolk Downs and the actual condition of the station.
Yeah.
And overall resiliency for the Blue Line. And I just want to be clear, you know, I represent MassDOT, and DCR owns most of those coastal roadways here in town, including Elliott Circle and Revere and Shore Drive and Winthrop Parkway. So I work very closely with a number of the folks that are in charge of making improvements there. So I'm certainly happy to bring that back to my colleagues over at our sister agency. But I think, just so it's clear for everyone, MassDOT doesn't really have any jurisdiction there. We do have a project that we have under consideration, just also to address some other comments I heard earlier about Elliott Circle and the Revere Beach State Road locations. We are also looking at a project that would bring these bike facilities through Darnley Square all the way to Elliott Circle, and that would involve some other traffic pattern changes through that spaghetti bowl of ramps and signals.
That makes sense. And to your point about putting the traffic light up, and if they can't do a traffic light, I mean, there's other things you can do to slow down traffic. You can put a stop sign up. You can, you know, they have the 3-dimensional crosswalks now. Just signage. There's other things that can be looked at.
We use speed humps. We use speed humps on. Oh, look, there it is. That's my background. That's the Belle Isle. I swear I didn't do that. That's the Kilmartin path, and it's like my personal cathedral. You know, but we've used speed humps on Day Boulevard out in front of the M Street Beach. That would be a City of Boston sort of conversation.
All right, and I take back what I said about Suffolk Downs being a hidden secret. That's not true. Don't listen to that at all.
Well, and they'll still be parking on road for you. So. You just need to get one of those East Boston stickers.
And just a quick question before I go to Councilor Belcher. On, assuming this takes place in
Recording in progress.
late spring, early summer, whatever, are there any construction delays, any street closures,
No, I
construction
don't think
delays
so.
that you're
I mean, it'd
anticipating
be
at all?
really, really minor. I would expect us to be able to implement this in a matter of days, if not, like, we're planning to do some micro resurfacing on the Revere side of Bennington. That might take a couple days, and then the restriping would be very, very quick, maybe overnight.
Councilor Belcher.
Thank you. My concerns about this have more to do with like the larger transportation landscape. Like the president mentioned, the tunnel closure, I think, is a terrible time to be messing with this area. The way to get to the city from Winthrop when that's closed is going right through this area up to like 16 and over that way. I think it's gonna get really congested, and even if it doesn't impact the traffic on that road, anything that's new or confusing, I think is gonna slow things down more than the project anticipates, and I think it's a tricky time to be messing with that. Also with the bus network redesign, the plan is to have buses coming from Winthrop through Beechmont over to Suffolk Downs, and that's just something to kind of take into consideration. It'll change the type of traffic that comes through that area. And then my only other question was the model times for delays at those lights. Have you looked at models for different times of the day? Because I would assume traffic is really heavy during commuting times and much lighter. So where do those estimates fall?
Yeah, so we typically model for the AM peak and then the PM peak, so your typical commuting times.
Okay.
And for that reason, because they typically tend to be higher.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it only gets better from there.
Councilor Munson.
Thank you, President Lettieri, and thank you, Michael and Taylor. I have some very small scale questions, but I also have some bigger level questions. To start with the small stuff, when you showed us the modeling and the future of the count based on Suffolk Downs full activation, or in 2040, you said, it's a pretty long time for them to get fully activated. But I am curious though, is there any zoning or lots along that could be developed and turn into an additional effect on your model?
Generate additional trips. Not that I'm aware of. I mean, other than the Casket site, which is obviously under redevelopment now on the East Boston side, I don't see any other major land use. This was part of the reason why this section of the corridor was, was most ripe for this demonstration. Because I don't think it works everywhere. Certainly doesn't work in Orient Heights Square, am I right? No, but this is an area where we don't think those land use changes are have that potential, and certainly against the mega development of Suffolk Downs, that the rest of it's a drop in the bucket.
And their traffic impact assessment would have taken into account anything that's at least on the books. So
Right.
some things developments that will be occurring.
So along that strip that you've analyzed and then displayed for us, there are no actual lots that anyone can develop, is from what you can tell.
I mean, other than the small residential neighborhood that's over behind Leverett, that's Marsh,
It's Marsh and then it's the
and the
train
school,
tracks.
the school and their open space.
It sounds like it will be a great, and I agree with you, I'd rather have that two-way bike traffic on one side, just feel safer. And I also, I like the fact that you're thinking logistically about the plowing convenience and that bike lanes don't become snow bags, But I do have some of the bigger questions I'm wondering are, and I love that you actually alluded to it, and I wish Mass DOT actually talked about this a lot more, because it does seem like there's a lot of pushback on the TIPS project with Revere Street, with the bike lane, because it just feels like a strip of bike lane that's not contiguous,
Right.
and it feels very not thought through. No offense, I'm sure you guys have thought it through a ton, but so if you could just explain that larger vision and how that actually comes to fruition, and so it gives us a better understanding of why we're pushing through on this. I mean, I'm sure that at the state level, you guys have been mandated to push through bike lanes and bike sharrows a lot. And it would be nice to know the bigger vision of how that actually comes to fruition, because as of right now, it just feels like one little clip of pseudo-safe bike lane so that we can get from one non-bike lane to another. It doesn't make
Right.
a lot of sense.
Right.
And so I'd be curious to know that bigger picture, because I think it would help us. And the last thing I'm going to ask you is your modeling software. I would love to be able to have a continuous conversation with the town of Winthrop at the seat with DOT to be able to know what happens when Suffolk Downs becomes fully utilized, not just for this one strip by Belle Isle, but actually permanent, like forever. Are we even gonna be able to leave the town in under 45 minutes? It's scary to think about what 10,000 people do to your only one or two entrances and exits. So,
I mean, I have not been that close to the Suffolk Downs project, other than in these pieces of offsite mitigation that have impacted the work that I'm doing at MassDOT. But from a process perspective, their Section 61 mitigation that was required through the MEPA process and their draft and final EIRs and all that, larger environmental review. Donnelly Square was the one that, we're more familiar with, but they have to look at where do you generate traffic as in on your site, and what are the origins and destinations of that traffic, how they're impacting the daily trips on the transportation network. I have to imagine that there is a phase where Orient Heights Square is under some level of consideration. That's not under our jurisdiction, so I don't have a lot of details on it. And I'll acknowledge that I've sat and watched that intersection operate many times, and I've experienced the queue back to the bridge on Saratoga, and thought to myself, there's got to be a better way to manage this intersection, and it's not really in our purview to dive into that, but there definitely are the tools in our toolboxes to do so, and that's something that the city of Boston really needs to take up.
To stay current with that conversation.
And to be
able to make our two cents heard, what would you advise our strategy being going forward to make sure that we're not getting overlooked or
I don't know that it's appropriate for me to say so as a bureaucrat at MassDOT, but as a resident of East Boston, I would contact my state senator, who happens to have multi jurisdiction in that way. We just don't, and MassDOT's interest in the Suffolk Downs offsite mitigation would have come in the form of our role as a MEPA reviewer, as the lead technical for transportation. So we help the MEPA office, as the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act office, and that is the overseer of that larger environmental review framework. We would have helped them scope that transportation impact assessment as like a technical arm of state government. I'm sure that the assessment itself probably talks about what those anticipated impacts are in places like Orient Heights Square and Day Square and other places in East Boston and Revere.
And then lastly, the interconnectedness, the big vision.
Yeah. I don't think that I'm going to be able to pull this up quickly enough, Counselor, because live, and I don't have internet here, but at some point I'll follow up with Denise and make sure I get a link to you guys. We have so I'm a member, I was alluding to this earlier, but I'm a member of the Trails team. It was a group of us in state government that was convened by the Baker administration and is still proceeding under our current administration. And we're really just an efficient group of people in state government who get together and meet and talk about what are our goals for this larger network and how do we support. We created the Mass Trails Grant Program. It's what's supporting the extension of the Greenway into Winthrop now and all of that. We put down pen to electronic paper, what we call our statewide vision map. And what that shows is sort of this interstate level. When I say interstate, like interstate highway type connection, network of connected off-road facilities that include things like the Mary Ellen Welch and the Northern Strand Community Trail that spans from Lynn down to Everett now, but is envisioned to connect into Somerville and connect back to Revere, both through major infrastructure like the General Edwards Bridge, the Linway, Revere Beach Boulevard, all of these sort of big pieces of capital investment that ultimately will lead to this front door. Maybe not quite this front door, but maybe this backyard, and bring that sort of larger network for so many of our residents in the Commonwealth. Like I said, I don't have it handy. I usually would if I had internet. So if there's Wi-Fi that I can connect to, I could show you that map. But in the meantime, barring that, we'll get it in your hands so you can see it. But it is this really incredible long-term vision for not only the North Shore and the connection from here to the border of New Hampshire. There's a border to Boston Trail that connects Lynn to Peabody and up to Boxford and Salisbury. Long time envisioned that we're really doubling down on trying to implement. And it wasn't until the Trails team convened and we started saying where are we missing we've always had big, like, advocacy around these mega regional trails, like the Bruce Freeman Trail in Acton and Concord, or the Northern Strand in Lynn, Revere, Saugus. How do we create other energy in other places, like here in Winthrop? And we've been successful in helping move those pieces along bit by bit. Even complicated ones like crossing the Belle Isle Marsh.
Councilor Fusolo.
No questions at this time, thank you.
Councilor Honan.
Okay.
Thank you very much. All my questions have been asked and answered. Thank you.
All right, I told you guys I would talk a lot,
Yeah, right.
so.
You didn't disappoint on any level, so I can't thank you both
I
enough.
don't thank you all for having us.
And
Just one
yep,
really
one
quick
follow-up.
point, I promise really, but hearing some other comments, just couldn't help myself. But with the bike lanes only being on the marsh side, you know, if we're gonna be encouraging folks to ride your bike to then hop on the T to go to work or vice versa, come home from work, we really gotta consider that crosswalk. I know you said it wasn't in the plans, but you're either gonna have to ride your bike to there and then cut across 3 lanes of oncoming traffic, or park your bike, on the marsh side and then cross without a crosswalk. So it just doesn't seem.
There's no crosswalk in the middle at the Belle Isle
Okay.
driveway. There's crosswalks at either end.
There, so you can park your bike in front of the Suffolk Downs station somewhere potentially,
Oh, yeah.
and then cross safely. That
Yes,
exists right
yes,
now.
yes.
Okay, just
Oh,
wanted to
absolutely.
make
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, sorry, I was speaking very specifically to, there's a desire
The marsh itself.
to cross from the
Okay,
Suffolk,
but you
the
can
blue line
cross
side to the marsh side.
Understood. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Again, thank you both. We will have you back, I could promise that. And
I look forward to talking about your Greenway extension someday with you all.
well, I did also, just on a similar caveat, I know, and you've made clear that MassDOT has certain jurisdiction and City of Boston has their own. And I did talk to Senator Edwards today and hope to have some information shortly, but there is discussion about some sort of similar type project from Wood Island to Orient Heights, which, you know, I want Winthrop to be a part of, because that could be disastrous in a lot of ways, to me, my opinion. But again, until we understand it and know what it's about. So Senator Edwards has been very helpful with me, and we'll be getting back. And again, it's always good to share ideas and but you know, Winthrop doesn't want to be forgotten in any of this. There's a lot going on with Suffolk. I mean, it's another Winthrop, basically. It's 20,000 people potentially. And we are very limited. We talked about lifelines getting in and out, and with the weather and such, we're dependent on a lot of other people. I hate being dependent on anybody, but we are. So
I was dependent on the MBTA of all things to get here tonight. I would say that, you know, so I think what you're referring to, Mr. President, is so part of where this all came from was the envisioned road dieting, as we refer to it, and this is sort of a pilot of that on Bennington, as envisioned by the corridors and squares chapter of the Plan East Boston Comprehensive Plan. That does sort of conceptualize, idealize at a very, very cartoonish level the sort of greenwayification of Bennington Street, and in this corner of the world, sort of pulling that curb line in, reducing that pavement width, and providing more greenway-like facilities on both sides. That is so very, very early. You know, it was envisioned and put in a plan that looks like a plan, but it's not a plan. It's an idea for the future. And what we do as professionals in the transportation industry is then collect a lot of data. What we've done as a team, Taylor and I, this is small potatoes compared to what the City of Boston would have to do on a much, much larger capital investment scale. I mean, it would be a lot of dollars that would require a lot more process than a 19-slide PowerPoint can possibly demonstrate. I would say that's the more federal tip style project that requires now, whether the city did it on their own or with MassDOT involvement and federal dollar involvement is a different point, but it would require a great deal more homework than, oh, we're gonna do that. So I think I would expect as a resident, moreover than as a bureaucrat, I would expect there to be a great deal of public process and opportunity for, especially elected officials like yourselves to
Well,
participate.
thank you, and as an expert, we'll accept your opinion on that when it comes before us, so.
I look forward to joining you as a resident of East Boston on that.
Thank you, Michael, thank you, Taylor, again.
Thank you all
and,
for having us.
Appreciate your
Good night.
time. Public hearings, we have none this evening. We have a continued public hearing on the Ordinance Review Committee recommendations. Again, tonight was just going to be a summation. If anyone had any other questions or thoughts to bring up, the thought is that on January 31st, this will be on the agenda for a vote on each specific item. Again, just for clarification, those items will be able to be amended, altered. All votes will be required to have a supermajority of the council, which is 6 votes, to pass, to get onto the State House agenda, to then come back to the town to get voted on by the public in November. So the process is far from over, but our process is coming to an end after months of discussion between the committee, the subcommittee, and the full council. So we will now take up any discussion people might have. We'll go around the room. We've gone through every question. The only thing I'm still waiting for an answer on is to get some clarification. I think it might be question 6 or so on the thought of changing how to select on such boards as school committee to select an open seat. The current process is to have joint meetings with the council and the board, whether it be the school committee or whether it be the housing authority, and I think the thought was that we would let the board themselves pick their own replacement, and we were trying to get some clarification from the state if where we are considered the highest ranking elected officials, we are considered the people's voice, do we need to have a seat at the table? So we're just waiting to get some clarification on that before we make a determination. I think the thought was an excellent one. The vote was pretty much unanimous. So we're just trying to get some clarification on why. And the reason why I brought this up was the first council president, I had talked to him about this, and I respect Mr. Riley a great deal, and he had said that there was a reason why we had this selection process the way it was. I just want to make sure if we have the ability to change it or not. Other than that, we will go, and if the council vice president, who has done an incredible amount of work, I'll also say that we have 2 members of the Ordinance Review Committee here with us tonight. We have the chair, Mark Chapdelaine, and we have Kurt Millar, also, who was a member, or still is a member of the ORC. So thank them for coming also, and would start around the table. We will take comments. It is a continuation of a public hearing, so if any of the public has a question, please feel free to ask. If not, I'll open it up. Sure.
So, thank you, Mr. President and Council members. Bill Schmidt, Precinct 5. I haven't been here for a while, so I thought I'd just reiterate a couple of points I had mentioned before in communicating with you, and also a new thought that came to me based on a conversation with one of your body, and I won't identify who it is. So, in general, in terms of the question A, which has question 1, which has the 3 parts, just to reiterate where I'm coming from, I'm not in favor of eliminating the precinct councils. I think it's very important to have representation at the precinct level. I think if you had a situation with all at large, you invariably would have some portions of the town not really adequately represented. Number 2, I also think, because my whole approach is, I like the 2-year term, not only for the president, but I would also recommend the 2-year term for the councils at all. I think the idea is to have the council should be closer to people. I think that the 4-year term for councils is probably pretty unique. I mean, Boston City Council's 2-year terms, state reps are 2-year terms, members of Congress are 2-year terms. Having a 4-year term is kind of unique. And I'm also not in favor of the recall provision at that point, because now if we're gonna have 2-year terms, it seems like you're gonna be pretty close to either the beginning of the term or the end of the term, where it really doesn't make any sense. A new point that came up based on a conversation was, as I was looking through the charter, the provision for how you councilors have the opportunity to raise your pay. I don't know how long it's been since you have gotten a pay raise, but I know, seeing a lot of other communities, their pay is going up. And I looked at the section, which is section 2-4 on compensation, which talks about you have to have it done by an ordinance, and it has to be adopted by the, so for instance, if you took this year, you would have to have an ordinance passed by the last day of June, which would then go on the ballot, and it couldn't be for 4 years, it would be implemented. So that seems a long time. However, if you had a 2-year term, because I understand the 2 municipal elections, because you have to have half of the council and the other half of the council. If you had everybody at a 2-year term, you could adjust the council every 2-year terms. And I would recommend that you folks consider, whether it's UMass or somebody, the Collins Center or somebody else, look at what you folks are being paid. Because I probably suggest, based on this conversation with one of the counselors, probably, I don't know, Jim, you probably know this because these folks haven't been here for long. It's probably been, I don't know, 10 years or something since it's been adjusted?
No, it's never been. When the charter was written, there was discussion amongst the Charter Commission to, this question came up, and how much were we going to pay? And the thought was this should continue to be a volunteer position as it had been for the selectmen. We thought that would be challenged at some point, so we said, let's put a nominal rate. So we put a rate of $50 a week, or $2,600 a year for a counselor, and $5,200 for a council president, $100 a week, based on the fact that they're on different committees, multiple committees and such. So that has been in effect since 2005 when it started. We've never altered that. The reason why we put a 4-year term, if it was to be changed, was that anyone, for example, myself, if I was to propose a change and we passed it, it wouldn't take effect until after whoever proposed that change was up for re-election. So like you said, it would go through 2 election cycles. So if, the council decided to give themselves $100,000 each and they passed unanimously, that's great. Well, it doesn't take effect until everyone on the council has been potentially voted out. So, that's why we made it like that. Again, the council through an ordinance can do exactly what you said. Through this procedure, they could overwrite the charter, potentially change the charter, and say there is, we're proposing a, whatever the salary range may be. I do think, from some of the meetings I attended, it was discussed at the ORC, because again, I think many of these recommendations were done out of the thought to try to get more energy, more enthusiasm, more competitive races, right? So that's why I think, the thought on the all-at-large was, okay, you have more people to run. The thought on a lot of these things revolved around that, trying to get competitive races. And I think, obviously in life, right, the biggest driver you could get is money, right? People will do things for more money. So I think that was brought up at their committees, and I think that my understanding is there was such a disparity in what I think there was a relative, and I wasn't at every meeting, a relative consensus that it was probably the right thing to do, but there was a lot of disparity into what people thought. Some people thought it should be X amount, and some people thought it should be 20 times X. So they couldn't come up with a consensus on a dollar, so I think they just left it alone. But that is, everything you said was right. But there has not, I guess to answer your question, there has not been a raise for
Well, I
the
would-
council since
If I could
inception.
just suggest, that's why most people who've gone through that, no politician likes to be in the position of having to suggest their own increase and then vote on it, which is, oftentimes they have some professional, Collins Center, somebody else, do a study or look at an MMA or somebody like that to say what might be paid, because as I said, I've noticed a lot of councils, Revere, Brockton, a lot of places, they pay a lot, and I think, to your point, I think if, sometimes people would like to volunteer, but how can they justify the time with families? If you did increase the pay to some degree, you might get some folks, I'm not suggesting make it an exorbitant amount where people think about, oh yeah, it's a way to make money, but maybe a way that people could think, I can justify some of my time based on that.
I think you're
Just a
right. I
thought.
don't think it's a career job that you're
No.
going to say, okay, I'm gonna quit my job and, it's gonna be substantial enough. But it's a increased stipend to the point where it makes it
I just thought it was-
attractive. It was good, thank you. Other thoughts on the council? Again, we have gone through all the questions, we have made our comments, what's gonna happen at the next meeting, we will go through 1A, 1B, 1C. We will make a motion, and we will discuss it. There could be amendments on it. For example, Mr. Schmidt just talked about, one of the recommendations was to go to all at large. Somebody could, we could make a motion to put that on the table. There could be an amendment to say, I think it's a good idea to reduce the number to 7 or whatever the recommendation was, but instead of 6 at large and a council president, it could be 6 precinct and a council president. So there could be amendments made. If the amendment passes, then the amendment would be voted on. If the amendment doesn't pass, it would go back to the original. It's just like any other motion we would do during the normal course of business, but we will go through them. And again, it's still a process that it still needs a supermajority, which is 6 votes. Regardless, if there's 5 councilors here at the next meeting, we can't pass any of them because you need 6 votes. At that point, we're just giving it the okay to go to the State House and then come back and then be put on a ballot in November.
President Lettieri?
Yes, Councilor Munson.
I have a question.
Yes.
More of a process question. If we're to vote next town council meeting,
Correct.
then would this technically be the last chance to make an amendment or a motion?
No, you could make an amendment during the vote. So somebody's going to say, we're gonna put all these on the table, so we're gonna make a motion that the size and composition of the town council should be reduced and changed from 6 precinct councilors and 2 at large, and a town council president to 6 at large. So that's gonna be the motion, that's what came out of the committee. You could make an amendment to say, you know what, I think it's good to have that smaller size, but instead of at large, I still think each section of the town should have representation. I would like to amend it to 6 precinct councils. So, yeah, you could make an amendment at the next meeting. You could come up at the next meeting and say, I'd like to make a motion that, whatever the motion is, that.
The only thing I was really.
It doesn't have to be something that comes from this document.
I think that we alluded to this during the last town council meeting when that was 1A could be divvied up into 2 different sections so that it was just a little clearer for
Yes.
both us
Yep.
and the public to vote on.
Correct.
But that was the only thing.
Yep, you can make any amendment you choose. The amendment would be voted on, and the amendment would have to pass not by a supermajority. The amendment would just pass by a simple majority. Then the overall question would have to pass by a supermajority.
As of right now, I'm sorry to keep on kind of speaking
That's okay.
at will, but as of right now, there has been no revisions to the recall proposed change, and that the numbers there are still as they were presented originally. From
Yes,
the
and
last
I would
meeting.
suspect that when that motion is brought up, the first thing would be probably, I would like to increase the threshold to 20% of whatever it happens to be. So I would assume there would be some sort
That
of.
language has to be perfect when you're making a motion, wouldn't it need to be?
Yeah, I think,
It needs to be
anybody
very
making
well
amendments
crafted.
should be prepared.
So
Like they would be
ideally,
at-
written prior
At
to.
the, ideally as they are at a budget meeting when we pass the budget. A council will have a recommendation at a budget to change a line, and they would have to come with a corresponding line to make sure the budget stays even. Same thing with this. You would want to have the language pretty specific.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Huh? Yes.
One thing, Mark Chapdelaine, I was on the ORC, the chair of the ORC. One, thanks for giving us the opportunity, and thanks for all the time this council's put in. It was obvious the amount of time post us, given just the amount of time that's passed. One thing I did want to point out, though, recommendations 4, 8, 11, and 12, they're ordinance changes, so they can be made simply by a 2/3 vote of the council. So that does not need to go to the voters. I just wanted to make sure that was pointed out. And to touch on Mr. Schmidt's point, money was something, money increase for the councils was something that there was a general consensus for. There was a great difficulty in how much. I think Council President Lettieri pointed out on one end of the spectrum, it was, let's give a $50 a week raise. On the other end, it was, let's add a couple of zeros. So it really was something that the ORC was concerned about, kind of getting into those muddy waters. But at the same time, it's one of the measures of increasing interest. That alone wouldn't do it. I don't think you're going to get better quality candidates. Not that we don't have great candidates now, but we wouldn't have more of a push to have people run and put themselves through that necessarily. It's not one magic potion alone that's going to do this. It's individual small pieces that will hopefully generate a little bit more interest, and hopefully the public discourse will calm down at some point in time, and it'll be a more enjoyable job for you folks sitting up there. But again, thanks for all the time that you've put in to analyze our analysis, and if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. And from the council, we thank you guys as well, and the rest of the committee for putting in an abundant amount of time. It's it's very much appreciated. Anyone else? Any other discussion? All right, so again, for the public, we will be bringing the ORC recommendations to a vote. And just to reiterate what Mr. Chapdelaine just said, that all charter changes will need a supermajority vote, will have to go to the State House, will have to be voted on by the council, by the public. An ordinance change is as simple as an ordinance change would be during any normal course of business. All right, we will close officially this public hearing. All right, comment. I will be making a state of the town address as is in the charter, since we're talking about the charter, that the council president does make a state of the town address, and this will be done at our next council meeting on Tuesday, January 31st, 2023. Correspondence. Denise, do we have any correspondence, or has anyone received correspondence?
Received none.
Seeing none, committee reports. And there have been no committees. We did send out a updated committee list for the 2023 calendar year. We had, as we stated in the past meeting, we had consolidated a couple committees, and we have added a new committee. So we thank all the councilors for their input and help on that. School department report, there's a school committee meeting next Monday night, so we will be reporting on that at our next meeting. And now we will go to the town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I just want to give an update. I had a meeting last week with regard to the Complete Streets policy that was passed, I believe, in 2017 by this council, not this particular council, but members of this council that were here back then. And that policy, one of the things that were in there, and obviously complete street policies exist in a lot of communities, and they certainly did in the last couple that I worked in, but this policy has a committee attached to it. A lot of staff members on it, but also a couple of residents at large to be on the committee. It is a council president appointment, so I think looking to maybe get that on a future agenda to get a couple.
That will be on the next agenda.
Yeah, there's some
we'll
names
be making
coming
those
up, so I just
appointments.
wanted to, that group's looking to get involved, and put some policies and procedures in place with regard to future road improvements and things like that. I did want to announce Chief Delahanty was actually at our graduation academy today in Linfield. We had 2 new officers get through the academy and graduated. Nicholas DeCizio and Alexis Joyce. So those 2 will, come on board shortly. We've got 1 more starting next week in the Linfield Police Academy. Currently, there's 8 vacancies, with those 3 filling seats in the short term. We'll only have 5 vacancies left to fill at that point. I wanted to bring that up. One of the things that was brought up, and just to give a quick update, I know we've got that Google Doc list of ongoing issues, so I just wanted to kind of touch base on that and give an update on a few of them. The parking concerns we talked about at the last meeting, with regard to start ticketing anybody that's not moved in time, but we're moving the vehicles out of there, not only the town vehicles, but people that are illegally parking in the municipal lot behind for kids only in the church. Obviously, public safety building, middle school site, we're constantly working on that, more to follow on that. Park and Rec fee study, I had a good talk with Sean Driscoll today. Berry and Dunn is just about done with that fee structure. They want to come in, probably meeting in February or first meeting in March to give an update on that, where Park and Rec stands and recommendations that they might have moving forward, which they will have some. IT study and pay class study are still in process. I had a conversation with them last week. Making good work, but they're not quite ready yet. I did have an estimate, and I want to bring that back to the council's attention, monitoring the gas usage at the DPW pumps. We had that estimate, I believe, somewhere between 50 and 65,000. I have to pull it up. I don't remember off the top of my head to put in the the fob system at the pumps. We talked about it, I think, at the Citizens Finance Commission, but I wanted to bring that back to the council's attention. Something we'll probably look forward to, whether it's in this capital plan or maybe before then, just to get some. Because right now we just go up and the honor system, right? And that's really not accountability. We also want to track gallons of usage for a lot of reasons. So having a fob system in place and tracking that is certainly something I would recommend. So I'll be bringing that back before the council. We are starting doing the core checks on the staff, and we'll be getting ready to do the Brightly, aka School Dude, facilities needs assessment. The companies that's coming out to do the assessment of all the buildings will be starting shortly, probably in the next 2 weeks. And then Councilor Aiello had a bunch here. The database of all the approved Airbnb units. We'll be working on that. A document that shows all regulations to the department responsible for enforcement. Certainly we can work on that. We'll get that together. Resolution to the split water meter cost between Park and Rec and the skating rink. We are going to do an inline. Talked about that on the water main going into the building. We're going to do an inline rather than do all the main work with the work we're going to do in the buildings. Is not up in the air, but we're going to be moving forward some work. We don't want to do it twice. So we're going to do an inline water meter on that pipe so we can track the number of gallons that's actually going to the rink. And then a details, and then the capital improvement plan. That's I got all the requests in. We're building that now. Certainly use the time between now and the end of February to meet with that committee and have a couple of 2 or 3 meetings there, and then present the capital plan on track for the March 1st as we originally talked about. So, and that's all I have. And certainly open to questions.
Thank you. Any questions, Councilor Honey?
Thank you very much. So in regards to the DPW pumps, so just to confirm, it's still on the honor system?
Correct.
And to implement a fob system or some kind of car system would cost $65,000?
Yes, we had one before, so it's an older system. It would define, same company came in, they're on the state bid list, so it was kind of an easy swap. We actually reached out to 2 other companies. One put a bid in, it was substantially higher. The other one, never got back to us. But that, they're on all of them were on the state bid list. So we're happy with the company before. It just we didn't maintain the system. So this will put it in place, get the most, the latest and greatest. Allow all the cars would have to go up with a fob, whether it's police, fire, DPW employees, go with a fob and track it, put the plate number in, and we know exactly which vehicles were using what, when they filled up, and go from there. It makes a lot of sense. I haven't, last 2 or 3 places I worked out all had
so
that.
that's DPW, fire, and police that all fill up there?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah, the town pumps over off of Kennedy Drive.
they
Yeah.
can all for that, for
Yep.
the fob system.
Vice President Ruggiero.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. The paying class study, you said we were close. How close are we?
They're still working on it. I wouldn't say
Okay.
close. Yeah, I mean, these usually take between 3 to 6 months, and so
Okay.
yeah, they're working on it.
So
So.
before budget season, we should have something.
Yeah, I would
from
hope
them.
so, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I won't make any promises, but yeah,
Okay, yeah.
we're certainly pushing. But yeah.
Councilor Flockhart.
Town manager,
Yeah.
what has happened with the electricity consolidation that we had a presentation
Yep.
Patrick?
We need to do a follow-up. I mean, we need a vote of the council before we can move forward. When they came in and, told you, I can tell you, talk to the, former Chelsea city manager. They're still waiting for the, Department of Public Utilities to approve theirs, which they approved, a year and a half ago. But once we get a go-ahead from the council to move forward, then we can start the process of, advertising and moving forward with the aggregation. But we have to put it on an upcoming agenda and get that rolling.
So you'll put that on?
I'll put it on the agenda in February.
Yeah.
And we'll vote on it then.
Very
But we
good,
could,
thank you.
yeah, we could probably just vote on it right away.
Sure.
Councilor Aiello.
Couple of questions. On the inline meters for rink versus gym?
Yes.
How much is that gonna cost with the estimate of that?
I'd have to get
Not a lot of money.
not a lot of money, like
Okay.
probably
Short money.
less, yeah, short money, 1,000, maybe a little less.
Because that was the one
versus-
that was sort of trying to make sure we can allocate it.
Yep.
And if it was a lot of money, I was gonna say just get an agreement between the two,
Right, no, it's short money, because
That's great.
to do the whole main turnover was gonna be around between 12 and 15,000. I didn't wanna spend that money until
Yeah.
we had a final plan, so.
So you gotta.
We want to
that's
get an
a cheaper way of
accurate,
doing it.
we want to get an accurate reading, and this
Yeah.
is the easiest, quickest, most cost-effective way to do it.
Perfect. The second thing is a brief tour through the parking lot today. The same old people
Yep.
who shouldn't be there are there.
They were given till the middle of the month, as I said in the last meeting, they're still there, so we're just gonna start the ticketing process and also get some
Can
new
we get a
signs up.
report next
Yep.
meeting on how many tickets were issued in total?
Absolutely,
That would
hopefully they'll be
great.
gone by then, but yes.
Great. I
Goal
drive
is
by
out.
almost every day.
Yeah, I know,
Any other questions?
I'm driving through there now on a daily basis.
We'll go together.
Yeah.
Community diversity, inclusion, and community relations did meet this past week, and town manager,
Yep.
please report.
They actually had the first meeting in a little while. It was a great meeting. Talked about some upcoming initiatives for Black History Month and things they want to do moving forward. They're really happy. They've got their social media account set up now. Moving forward with that. Talking about when to post. A lot of conversation regarding comments that were made a few meetings ago now with regard to their concerns over the accessibility and the tree on Somerset. I believe that committee may even actually be putting a request in again with the tree warden soon to bring that back. So depending upon how that plays out, it may end up back in the council's hands. So just stay tuned. But anyway, that was going on. But the group's really excited. It was a great meeting, and they were very happy that I'd be giving the updates, and they wouldn't have to spend another night out. So they, but more to follow. A lot of good things coming down with that group.
All right, thank you. Old business, we already discussed the ordinance review committee recommendation. We also have the trash ordinance, which, again, there's been a tremendous amount of work done, especially by Vice President Ruggiero and his committee. I still have a lot of questions and think we need some financial details before we get much into this, but if there's anything that Vice President wants to say about it now, this is gonna be kept on the agenda, and, the goal is to initiate this in a short period of time, but I definitely have financial questions to make sure that we're aligned with what the end goal is, what we're looking for, and why we think this is the right thing to do, and, just to get some numbers on income that we think is going to be generated from some of the stuff we're recommending, and to just basically get back and enforce the contract that's 2 years old.
No, thank you, I appreciate it. The intent of this ordinance is one of the intents of this ordinance, which we discussed in a few different subcommittee meetings we've had, it was joint between Rules and Ordinance and Finance, but we want to make sure that the rules that are in place right now can be enforced by the town, so that everyone in the town of Winthrop is following the same set of rules for how we're disposing of our trash. That was the main goal of the ordinance. Separately, we wanted to make sure that, we treat this enterprise fund like we treat all of our other enterprise funds. And that, I think, is accomplished through the draft that has been circulated to all of us at this point. Just like the water rate, just like the fees at the hockey rink, just like the fees at Parks and Rec, that the council, we don't vote on those on regular cadence. So we defer a lot of those larger technical, more, I would say, professional financial decisions to the administration, so that it's taken out of the legislative political body that we have here in this room tonight. So that's the brief, in a nutshell, version of what is in front of all of, or in all of your emails. But obviously look forward to discussing more in depth at a later meeting. But
And I will say to anybody that's got, I mean, I sent it out a little while ago, but anybody that's got thoughts and comments on it, is certainly get them in. I received some from the Board of Health, but I haven't received any from any of the councilors. So if you've got thoughts and things, you questions, I know certainly talked to the council president about his concerns, but anybody else has them, just, if you could get them in so we can sort of adopt them in or not adopt them in, so.
get them into the town manager.
Yeah. Not,
Not to the vice president.
So we don't have an open, yeah, so we don't have an open meeting law violation, just.
Yeah, exactly.
Second round of, well, new business. I would like to make an appointment or reappointment of Paul Flanagan to the MWRA Board of Directors for the town until February 15th, 2027.
Motion?
Motion by Councilor DeMarco, second by Councilor Aiello. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
We need a roll call.
We do need a roll call for that?
Yeah, MWRA requests it.
Okay, so we'll do a roll call vote for that.
Council Honan.
Yes.
Council Picello.
Yes.
Council Munson.
Yes.
Council Belcher.
Yes.
Council DeMarco.
Yes.
Council Flockhart.
Yes.
Council Aiello.
Yes.
Vice President Ruggiero.
Yes.
President Lettieri.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for your commitment to the town. The second round of public comment is now open. Yes.
Quick thing, Kurt Millar, Precinct 2. Couple of quick things, and appreciate everything you guys are doing with the ordinance and charter. And we put a lot of effort into that. A point that I just wanted to make with this is sometimes it's hard, from discussing with a few people about what has been done. And I know how the council is the representation of the people, but sometimes where maybe some communication when I'm talking to people about this is the understanding of, well, why can't we vote on this and why does the council get to vote on it? So that it's hard for some people to understand that, yes, you represent the people, but when you represent the people and then are choosing your own form of government and how it will be is where I think the question lies. So just putting it out there, some feedback that I've gotten, you know, when I hang around town and everything, that it's questioning how come we can't just vote on what was already put out there. So just throwing that out there. A couple other points I want to bring up. I've been listening on a whole bunch of different meetings. I've gone to a couple different meetings for the Board of Health and having some concerns with changes that are occurring. One would be a tie-in with like our new chicken ordinance or pet ordinance, keeping of pets. I feel that some of those changes need to really be looked at a little bit more in depth and not just gone by the Board of Health. Have professionals come in and actually give the true knowledge of different types of animals and what they could potentially, pros and cons of them. So in many cities, their Board of Health have brought in professionals, let's say just chickens, professionals in the industry to explain how it could benefit towns and how it can affect towns negatively. And they've created their ordinances from that. So just in Revere, if you go to what their changes were, I believe it was back in March, they actually believe where we're changing to 10 feet by 10 feet on the property line, if I read it correctly, they're still at 5 and 2. And they just passed that because they actually had a professional come in and explain the benefits of what's allowed in the area. So there's concern about avian flu and all these different things from different birds. It was brought up at the meeting that geese do their thing where kids are playing soccer and football in the fields. And then it's proposed also that, well, Board of Health can't do anything about that. So I think the concern lies here is that maybe communication between the council, town manager with the Board of Health, that we need more maybe external input when some of these ordinances are being finalized and signed. It could be greatly appreciated for the better understanding of why these changes are made, and it's not just done completely solely based on opinions from that committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kurt. Mr. Schmidt? Bill.
Yeah, so I'll respond. Bill Schmidt, Chair of the Board of Health. We studied this issue for months. We got information from many communities. In fact, our changes are modeled largely on what Revere had. I sent the information to the council for your input. And we have professionals on the committee. We have 2 nurses. We have health professionals. I worked for the Commissioner of Public Health. We studied this issue. So there's going to be differences of opinion in different communities, just like you can go to 2 lawyers and get different opinion. You can go to 2 doctors and get a different opinion. So there's not like a uniformity of opinion. We feel the board, it was a unanimous decision, that we made the best decisions, and erring on the side of caution is never a problem, I think. So I feel strongly that what we've done is appropriate, and with all due respect.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Online.
Okay.
Julia Wallace,
Julia?
you unmute?
Says she's talking. I can't hear her.
I can hear it faint.
Right.
Julia?
Oh, I think she's talking.
There
Oh,
you are.
there you are, okay.
Now we can hear.
Hello?
Yes.
There we go.
I'm confused. All right, can you hear me?
Yes, you are good to
yes.
go.
Yeah.
Good to go. Okay. The joy. Sorry I couldn't be there in person yet again. But anyway, Julia Wallace, Precinct 2. Let's see where to start. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. Just have a few things to touch on. First, that was really great. I'm so glad I checked the agenda. Thanks for having Mascot there tonight to present about Bennington Street. Super exciting to see how these plans for the roadway are tying in with what we've been working on with the Mary Ellen Welch Freeway extension for years. And I know we are overdue for an update on that, but it's really a transformative project for the town, for the region. So stay tuned for spring when we'll have hopefully some public meetings about that feasibility study and how that project will tie in with what you saw on Bennington Street. Secondly, I've had the joys of watching some of the recordings of council meetings late at night for the hours that I'm up in the middle of the night. And I've noticed that there's a lot of attention on sidewalks and traffic calming, particularly Walden Street. And I just wanted to suggest strongly utilizing some of these big pots of state money that continues to be allocated and increased through the Shared Streets Grant Program, as well as Complete Streets. I had the great honor of serving on the Healy Driscoll administration, the transition team recently, and I can say that a huge priority of this administration is safety, road safety for all across the boats. Traffic fatalities were at an all-time high since COVID, both for pedestrians, cyclists, and for motorists. And so it's an enormous priority to slow traffic, make our streets safer, including right here at home. So it can be overwhelming thinking about bump outs, raised intersections, and rotaries and things that slow cars, but we don't have to do it on our own. There is a lot of great state support for these projects. So I hope we'll continue to take advantage of that. Looking forward to the speed reduction flashing signs going in on Pleasant Street soon. So that's exciting. I just want to throw some support for those efforts so that we don't have to sort of play catch up after something horrible has already happened, as unfortunately we've had happen in a few places. So the last thing I've seen come up a few times, just wanted to clarify publicly, there seems to be confusion about sharrows. Notwithstanding the bike lane controversy on Revere Street, but do have sharrows on our streets, and I've heard a number of folks say, oh, like the cyclists aren't using them, and why don't you ride in the sharrow? But just to clarify, those are just indicators
mostly for motorists to say that bikes are welcome here. And as the town manager pointed out earlier, we have this amazing complete streets policy that we passed in 2017. So as a complete streets community, it makes sense that we have streets that, reflect the scope of folks that use the road, from people in cars to buses to bikes to on foot. So that's what that's all about. And yeah, I'm excited to hopefully see those put back on and get our streets safer for everyone so that we can be a inclusive and accessible community for all. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Julia. I thought you were going to say you were watching these tapes at night to help put your baby to sleep.
Gavin,
Let's
be honest, it's for Gavin.
Well, there's no reason I'm up late at night a lot these days. So it's available on YouTube at any time of day or night.
Okay, well, thank you. Public relations, I do want to announce an opening on the Citizens Finance Committee. Jan Trombley, who has been a member of that committee for over a decade, has provided so much to that committee, her professionalism, her ability to listen to both sides of an issue and just come up with the right suggestion. Her, unique financial skill set has just been so admired by everyone on that committee, and I thank her for her time. Her work schedule has just now made it next to impossible for her to be able to continue, so she will be stepping down. She will be sorely missed, but we are looking for someone on the Citizens Finance Committee, and therefore the Citizens Finance Commission, or the Finance Commission. Also, there is an MMA trade show, January 20th and 21st, so this Friday and Saturday. That is an annual show. We have had a couple of postponements for COVID, but it is a great event, and I believe all the councilors will be attending along with the town manager. And there is a lot to be learned there, and a lot of great activities, a lot of great seminars, and I'm sure many will take advantage of as many as they possibly can.
Council President, if I could just point out,
Yeah,
the
ma'am.
council members that hadn't been there before, when you go to the trainings, some of them are Maya sponsored, and Maya's our insurance company. We actually get credits for attending the trainings, and they actually give us credit and monies off of our bill. Every year, we do it at the department head level, but any council that goes to a training that's Maya sponsored, if you sign in for it, we'll get credit for it and ultimately get some discounts later on, so I just wanted to point that out.
And Denise, could you tell us a little bit about the January 25th at the E.B. Newton? What is it?
Yeah, the author Stephen Paleo, who wrote The Greater Boston Molasses Flood, is gonna be speaking in person. Hannah is very excited.
I'm so excited.
Why is that?
I love the molasses.
We know
Yeah,
that Hannah
right,
does
yeah.
love doing
Mhm.
molasses run.
So it is an interesting subject, and he'll
It's
be there in
really,
person.
it sounds goofy, but it's really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
It's very interesting. I
Kind of a
promise.
sticky situation.
Uh-huh. 21 people died. Seven more.
Steve Pulio, I've known him, I knew him like, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago.
It's gonna be great. The book is really good.
Yeah.
The library has copies.
Councilor Honan, do you have anything?
I do not.
Councilor Fusillo? Councilor Munson?
Well, thank you.
Councilor Belcher?
No.
No more molasses talk?
I mean, I could go on.
Councilor DeMarco?
I just want to thank you for your words. We lost two really good people. So hearts are heavy. Hopefully, we don't have to do that at the beginning of a council meeting for a while.
Well said. Councilor Aiello?
Yeah, we certainly did, we certainly did. I would just add, my wife and I had the ability to go into downtown Boston on Monday, Martin Luther King Day, and I would strongly recommend, while it is an unusual piece of art, it's really stunning when you get there and you can walk under it, through it, et cetera. I'd encourage everybody, when you have a chance to go and see it, it's just really remarkable.
Councilor Flockhart? Vice President Major?
Did you take the tea there, or did you?
Unlike a guy from Mass Secretary's gonna hear about that.
I also just wanted to say how great it was to have the students here. It's nice when we have visitors for good reasons, and hopefully we can get the rest of the recipients in here, if their schedules allow, to receive this citation.
Yes, and they will be receiving another citation from the school committee on Monday evening. And this is, I believe, to the best of my knowledge, and I've been here for a while, this is the most recipients we've had of this, and that's a credit to the schools, it's a credit to the children, it's a credit to the parents.
Yeah.
Especially after
Especially,
COVID.
yes, so congrats to
And the
all of
uncles, the uncles.
them. And the uncles. All right, does anybody care to make a motion to adjourn? Motion by Counselor Casilla, second by Counselor Belcher. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned.